Welcome to Red Pill Nation. I'm Scott Veritast, and today I'm doing a solo show, no guest today. We are going to cover the 2020 presidential election, which is imminent. As of today, when I'm recording this, it is October 31st. Happy Halloween, by the way. I am not in costume. I don't have a party to go to, and I do not plan on trick-or-treating. I'm a little old for that at my age. So unfortunately, I do not have a costume. I just have this black button-up that I am donning today. So, happy Halloween. It's October 31st. We've got 2 days to go, basically, assuming nothing else happens this Saturday evening. We've got Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday's Election Day. And if you're listening to this, you're actually listening to it on Monday. I film these on Saturdays, edit them a little bit on Sundays, and then post them on Mondays, which will be convenient this week because it means that the episode will come out on Monday when you are listening to this, perhaps if you're listening to it the day that it comes out. So yeah, it'll come out with my predictions. I'll miss a couple days worth of polling data. If I have any changes to my map, which I'm going to tell you all about in terms of my prediction for the election, I'll maybe talk about them on Twitter or something, maybe post them to the YouTube community post. In any case, we're going to talk about the 2020 presidential election today. And I want to start with my prediction for what's going to happen. Which, traditionally I've always kind of had a little bit of an interest in predicting elections, and I've usually been pretty good at it in the past. Like many people who predict presidential elections, I did rather poorly with the 2016 elections. Pretty much everyone got that one wrong. One of the people who was least wrong that I always kind of defend was Nate Silver. He gave Trump roughly a 30% chance of winning the election, which is not at all insignificant. And of course, we all know Trump did win the 2016 election. I was thinking his range of winning was closer to like 10, 15%. And in 2020, I think it's even lower. I'll get into what my prediction is. Take this all with a grain of salt. I could be wrong. Everything I say could be wrong. I mean, I don't have any way of seeing the future, but based on my understanding of politics and of the data that is available, which is a pretty good understanding. I have done this before. And by the way, my predictions in 2018 were very accurate, so I rebounded a little bit in the midterms. My predictions in 2014 to 2012 were also very accurate. 2016 was really the only time that the predictions I have made on social media have been wildly incorrect about what would happen in the election. Usually I'm quite accurate. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I think is going to happen on Tuesday and perhaps for days after Tuesday, because we might not know who wins on election night with so many absentee ballots coming in due to COVID-19. And I'm also going to tell you what I hope happens. Of course, if you're predicting elections honestly, you're not going to have the same exact thing as what you want to happen be what you think is going to happen, at least probably not. So what I want to happen is different from what I think is going to happen. And what I want to happen is a little bit more complicated than what most people want to happen. I'm not really rooting directly for Trump or Biden. I mentioned previously on the show that I'm writing in, I haven't voted yet, I'm voting on Tuesday. I'm writing in Tulsi Gabbard's name for president and Dan Crenshaw's name for vice president. Yeah, that's Brett Weinstein's unity ticket, but that's not why I'm writing them in. I'm writing Tulsi Gabbard in because I think she is a woman for the moment and would make a great president. Of course, she is not actually a candidate. So the person I vote for has a 0% chance of winning this election. But in terms of who actually does have a chance to win this election, that would be either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And what do I think is going to happen on Tuesday? I'll give it to you straight. I think Joe Biden is going to win this election, and I think he is probably going to win it by a large landslide, or at least a considerable margin. I mean, I would say a landslide is you get 7-8% more in the popular vote than your opponent. You win 350 plus electoral votes. And that is what I have happening on Tuesday. Oh, just hit my notes. Sorry about that, folks. Bumped my notebook. So on Tuesday, my prediction, and I have my map in front of me here. If you ever want to play around with the electoral map, I recommend 270towin.com. Many of you have probably played with that before. It's just a nice tool to play around with the electoral map, see what happens if certain candidates win certain states. I'm looking at my map right now, and I have Biden projected according to my read of, because you're probably wondering, what is this all based on? I base my predictions off the polls to an extent, and I know people are going to say, oh, but the polls were wrong in 2016. Polls can be wrong. They absolutely can be, and they were a little bit off in 2016, but I'm going to talk about the fact that it is a misnomer that the polls were terribly, terribly off in 2016. They actually really weren't. There was a lot of irresponsible punditry suggesting that Clinton was a lock to win when really she was only leading in enough states to get her in 2016. Let's just talk about the polling situation for a minute before I get into my prediction, because I do base my predictions largely off the polls, and I want to defend the concept of polling for a minute, because everybody says the polls were wrong in 2016. You can't base your predictions off the polls. In 2016, it was the first time in modern presidential election history that the polls were considerably off from the final result. The polls had been pretty close. I think going back as far as like 2004, 2000, I mean, really going back as far as like the 80s. I don't think the polling had really been off at all, at least in my lifetime. I was born in the 90s. So in defense of polling, in 2016, the national polling for the popular vote nationally, which does tell you a lot about what can happen at the state level, because of course our presidents are elected via electoral college. However, you're not going to win the electoral college if you're only getting 30% of the vote and your opponent is getting 70%. That's not, every time that somebody has won the electoral college and lost the popular vote, they've still come very close in the popular vote. I think Trump was possibly the biggest example. He got 2% less of the popular vote than Clinton and still won the electoral college. That's about as poorly as you can do in the popular vote and still win the electoral college. He really lucked out there, and ran a much better campaign than people expected him to. So the national polling in 2016 said that Clinton would win by 3% in the popular vote. She won by 2%. That basically means the national polling was correct. It was correct. I mean, being off by 1% is not being wrong. Polls aren't an exact measurement. They have a margin of error of usually up to 3%. So if polls are only off by 2 or 3%, they're not really wrong. They're pretty accurate in that case. To put this into perspective, Joe Biden is currently leading in national polling by 7.5%, which is considerably more than Hillary Clinton was winning by in 2016. And if the polls were off by the same amount, they were off by 1% in Trump's favor last time, Biden would still win by approximately 6%, which is pretty big. To put that into perspective, the last landslide election we really had in the United States was Obama versus McCain in 2008. Obama won by 7% in that election. So if Biden wins by the amount projected by the polls or just a little less, he's in the neighborhood of Obama kind of putting the hurt on McCain, I think winning somewhere around 370, 380 electoral votes in 2008. That was a landslide election, and the Democrats picked up, I think it was like 8 or 9 seats in the Senate, took control of the House. That's a landslide. If you're losing by 7 or 8% in the national popular vote, you're looking at a landslide election. So my predictions are based partially off of the polls. It's also based off of just my intuition, where people have won recently. A Democrat won recently in Arizona in the Senate race 2 years ago. Democrats have been getting very, very close in Georgia in recent elections, like the one 2 years ago for governor. I look at past election results. I look at the polling data. I use my gut. I try to read the room. I think about what the country's talking about, what I see people talking about. And the map that I'm going to suggest and the electoral college result that I'm going to give you for my prediction is a Biden landslide. And it's based off the polling, it's based off of recent election results, and it's based off of the overall political climate that I'm reading right now, which is one that is very anti-Trump, and more so than it was in 2016. A lot of people who I think were on the fence in 2016, who held their nose and voted for Trump because they were Republican or because they had some conservative views, people who thought that both candidates were bad, are, I think, switching to Biden because he is considerably less offensive to people than Hillary Clinton was, which is funny because I voted for Clinton in 2016, and I would probably still defend that vote to this day because I'm not a big Trump guy, but I am not voting for Biden this year. I think in both cases, it has less to do with Biden and Clinton and more to do with the state of the Democratic Party, which I would consider batshit insane. And it wasn't quite as batshit insane in 2016. So I just think it's funny that Biden is doing better than Clinton when you consider that the Democratic Party is considerably crazier than it was 4 years ago. Regardless, I do think that is the case. I think Biden will perform much better than Clinton. The polling reflects that. People who say that the polls are wrong, again, the polling was wrong at the state level. I should have mentioned this before when I was talking about the polling. The polling was wrong at the state level in Michigan and Wisconsin, basically. The polling in Pennsylvania was actually very close in 2016. So yeah, the polls were wrong in Wisconsin and Michigan, and other than that, the polls were really pretty close throughout. I mean, it was a close election in 2016. The polls suggested it would be relatively close, and people kept saying Trump would lose because he was behind in Wisconsin and Michigan, and because Pennsylvania hadn't gone for a Republican in 20 years. Because the polls in Pennsylvania were close, he ended up winning Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. The rest is history. We all know what happened. So the polls really were not that far off in 2016. They would have to be off by more in 2020, much more than they were in 2016 for Trump to win. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to review how Trump can still win. Because although I'm saying there's going to be a Biden landslide, I do still think that there is a narrow possibility of Trump pulling off a narrow victory. The only thing I'm going to rule out for you guys on today's show is one thing that is not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to win a landslide victory in this election. If he wins, and he can win, and he might win, it will be narrowly. He will be in the neighborhood of 270 to 300 electoral votes. He will not be getting more than 300 electoral votes. That is not happening in this election. That I will rule out. And if I am wrong, I will eat crow. I am definitively saying, based on my understanding of this election, there is no possibility whatsoever of a Trump landslide. There is a small, maybe about 5% chance of him winning narrowly, and I think a roughly 90 to 95% chance that Biden wins, and a considerable chance that Biden wins by a landslide. But I'm going to go over how I think Trump can win narrowly later. On to my map. I keep talking about my prediction, and I'm not actually telling you. What do I think is going to happen? Again, based on the polling, which I don't think is useless, like some people say it is, based on what's going on. I mean, turnout is way, way up. I don't think that turnout is up because more people are voting for Trump. I think turnout is up because more people, the population in the Democratic Party that they've been trying to activate for many, many years, which is young voters, I think that group has finally kind of been spurned by, to some extent, the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the woke stuff that we talk about. By the way, I take no pleasure in saying this. I wish that people weren't voting because of woke supremacy and woke nonsense and identity politics, but I think that they are. I have read the room these past few months, and it seems that a lot of people, especially younger people, are saying, you got to vote for Biden or you're a white supremacist. I don't think that's true. I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but I don't think that if you vote for him, you're a racist. Anyway, my map is it's a big Biden victory, and it's Biden getting 375 electoral votes, which is a lot. It's about what Obama got in 2008, and Trump would be getting 163 electoral votes. In terms of who's winning what states, the only thing that is even close to a swing state that I have Trump winning is Texas. I don't quite think Texas is going to flip in this election. I think Texas is a state that it doesn't usually jolt around as much as other states, even though it is trending. I think Trump is going to narrowly win Texas and lose pretty much every other swing state. So I think Biden is going to win Arizona. I think Biden is going to win Florida. I think Biden is going to win Georgia. I think Biden is going to win North Carolina. I think he is going to win Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which were all of the light blue states that were competitive last time. The states that I'm having the hardest time with, and that I might switch back to Trump by election day, and I'll update the map on Twitter. And follow me on Twitter, by the way, at @Scott_Veritas. The states I'm having the hardest time with are Iowa and Ohio. Those states went for Trump by a considerable margin in 2016. He won them by 8% and 9%. This time around, I think Biden is going to very narrowly win Ohio and Iowa. But let's say hypothetically, and I may switch these two, that Biden loses Ohio and Iowa. He gets 350 or 351 electoral votes. That's assuming he wins all of the little congressional districts in Maine and Nebraska where they actually allot electoral votes by congressional district instead of statewide. That's a whole other complicated thing we won't get into. So basically, I think Biden is going to win 350 to 375 electoral votes. I think he will win the popular vote by about 7%. I think the polls are going to be like last time. They're going to be pretty close on the national vote. They might be off in a couple of states. Maybe Trump gets up to 200, 220, 230, maybe even 250 electoral votes. I'm going to go over that in a minute. I do not think Trump is going to win this. He might, and if he does, it'll be by a very, very narrow margin. It'll be because he gets a lot of luck and because the polls are systematically off much more than they were in 2016. But my prediction, guys, is Biden's going to win this thing. I'm not going against the conventional wisdom. Part of me wants to after 2016, but not going to do it. So let's talk about, I know in my audience, I have people who I think are voting for Biden. I have people who are voting third party. And I know I have some of you who are voting for Trump. And I'm not making you feel any better about his chances on Tuesday. And I'm not going to lie to you. I think if you're a Trump voter listening to this, he's probably going to lose, probably by a lot. He can win, though. And let's just review what I think that looks like. If Trump wins, it requires what you'd call a systematic polling error, which means that a lot of state polling has to be off and that the national polling has to be off a bit. But let's get into it, and I'll describe a scenario in which Trump wins that is not completely insane. And this is why I still think he has a chance to narrowly win this. He has no chance of getting a landslide, but he could narrowly win this. I'll explain how. Let's take the national polling for this election, which puts Biden at about a 7% popular vote margin. Let's say that the polls are off by 2. That's not that crazy for the polls to be off by 2. So instead of Biden winning by 7% in the national polling, he wins by 5% in the national polling. That's about what Mitt Romney lost by in 2012. And that was a relatively close election. So let's say the polls are off by 2-3%. Not that crazy. Biden only wins by 4 or 5% in the popular vote rather than 7%, which is really getting into that landslide territory. And let's say that that same polling error of about 2 or 3%, which is not crazy to imagine, let's say that that is reflected in every single state where Trump is losing by 2 or 3%. So what I'm saying is every place where Trump is within 2 or 3% in the polling average of Biden, the polls are off by 2 or 3%, which is not crazy. It's lucky if it goes in his direction in every single state, but maybe there's a shy Trump voter effect. Maybe what happened last time with the polling, which is that they didn't weight the polls for education because people who are not highly educated were voting for Trump more. Maybe something like that happens again. I'm gonna do that to my map here, and I'm sorry I can't show you the map. I know it would be useful for me to show you the map, but I'm just gonna flip all the states and a congressional district here in Maine. I have now flipped all the states on my map where Trump is only losing by 2 or 3% in the polls. Or in some cases, he's ahead. He's narrowly ahead in Ohio, I think. And he's narrowly ahead in Texas, although I had him winning that to begin with. So if we give him all of those states, he is at 259 electoral votes. Now, if you know anything about this election, you know you need 270 electoral votes to win. That's pretty close. 259 is pretty close. The problem is that in order to get to 259, you got to lose the popular vote by less than 7. You're not getting there losing by 7%. But we've established that in the scenario I've put out where Trump wins. And also, we've established that there's a systematic polling error in all of the close states. The problem for Trump is that even when you do this, he's not quite there at 270 electoral votes. Not quite there. But the thing that gives a little bit of hope is that for Trump voters is you have this systematic but small polling error in a bunch of states and in a little bit in the national polling. And then you just need one state, particularly the state of Pennsylvania, where Biden is solidly ahead by about 4 or 5% right now. But that's not, if polls are off by 4 or 5% in one state, that's not unheard of. That did happen last time. The Michigan and Wisconsin polls were off by 4 or 5%. I think Wisconsin polls were off by like 7%. That was the worst one in 2016. So let's flip Pennsylvania under the assumption that basically Trump gets a bunch of small polling errors in, let's see, it was Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio. Or no, he's winning in Ohio. Sorry, it was Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida. So he gets small polling errors in 4 crucial states. That's how you get him to 259. Then he gets a big polling error in Pennsylvania. He is at 279 electoral votes, and he wins the 2020 presidential election. This is not impossible. If you are a Trump voter and you really want to hold on to hope, and again, I am not a Trump voter, but I am saying to those in my audience who are, if you are a Trump voter and you really want your guy to win, that it's going to look like this probably. really should be showing you the map. I'll post my map on Twitter before Election Day. Go to my Twitter if you want to actually see the map. But the map I have right now, Trump wins Pennsylvania. He wins North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Ohio, Arizona, Texas. And he gets 279 electoral votes, which is enough to win. But boy, do the polls have to be wrong, and wrong by a lot more than they were in 2016. So that's how Trump wins. I give him maybe a 5% chance of this happening, and that's not nothing. But that's how it happens. Anyway, my prediction is Biden wins by about 350 to 375 electoral votes. He wins by about what the national polling says in the polling average. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, maybe that's not interesting to you because you're like, who the hell are you to tell me what's going to happen? Anything can happen. And you're right, but you might want to know, what do I want to happen? Because none of what I just said is at all reflective of what I want to happen. And by the way, before I move on, people might ask, who do you think is going to win the Senate? I think the Democrats will win the Senate. I think they'll have like 52, 53 votes in the Senate, something like that. But anyway, that gets me to my next topic, which is, what do I want to happen on Tuesday? That gets a little complicated. If you listen to this show, for me, it's not as simple as Trump winning by a lot or Biden winning by a lot. What I want to happen, I would say, is this. So when I went and I voted, or actually I haven't been to voting yet, but I was filling out a practice ballot. That's what I was thinking about. When I was filling out my practice ballot, and when I go to vote on Tuesday, what I'm planning on doing is writing in the names of candidates who are not the nominee of either major party, Tulsi Gabbard, Dan Crenshaw for president and vice president. I am voting Republican for Senate in the state in which I reside. I am voting Republican in a couple other elections. I don't think I am voting for a Democrat this year, and that's a first. Well, Tulsi Gabbard's a Democrat, so never mind. I am voting for a Democrat. So I'm voting split ticket. And this is reflective of what I want to happen on Tuesday. What I want to happen, for my sake, as somebody whose number one issue is the incursion of woke supremacy on our society, something I talk about on this show quite a lot. What I want to happen on Tuesday is a little complicated. I'm going to explain it now. I want Biden to win narrowly as possible, because I want Republicans to retain control of the Senate. This is within the realm of possibility, and it is what I would like to see on Tuesday. It is not what I am predicting. I am predicting a Biden landslide and a Democratic Senate, but within the realm of possibility is certainly a Republican Senate and a narrow Biden victory, or I would also be pretty happy with a narrow Biden victory and a Democratic Senate that only has flipped Democrats by maybe 1 or 2 seats, because there are enough moderate Democrats to, I think, hold them in line, keep them from packing the court, which is one of my number one concerns. So, if Democrats win 51, 52 seats, certainly if they win 50 seats and Biden is president, I'm not going to cry myself to sleep on Tuesday. I'm going to go, okay, that was predictable and honestly not as bad as I thought it would be, because I don't want a Democratic landslide. Because to me, what a Democratic landslide does is it vindicates all of the shitty journalists and activists who have been demonizing conservatives and everyone who's not woke for the past several years, and have been promoting conspiracy theories about Donald Trump that, even though I do not like him, I happen to know are not true, i.e. Russiagate. I don't want them to be vindicated. I don't want this big landslide victory for Democrats that says, yeah, journalists keep doing what you're doing and smearing Republicans. Activists keep being ridiculous and rioting in the streets every time you don't get your way. I don't want that vindication. But I do want Biden to win narrowly. And I'll just say, I watched I'm going to recommend a debate that Brett Weinstein hosted on his Unity 2020 channel between Jesse Singal and James Lindsay, because it was between somebody who's kind of an anti-woke liberal, Jesse Singal, who voted for Biden, and James Lindsay, who is an anti-woke liberal with whom I'm sure many of you are familiar, who voted for Donald Trump. And I was not really convinced by either of them because I didn't vote for Biden or Trump. But I recommend that debate because I think it's kind of arguable if you're an intellectual, dark web-minded kind of person whose number one issue is this woke stuff, the woke supremacy I talk about on the show, the culture war. If that's your number one issue, there's an argument to be made. I think your instinct tells you vote for Trump, right? Because he's against that stuff. He banned critical race theory, diversity trainings, yada, yada. He's conservative. I think there's actually a whole layer to that is being missed. Donald Trump enables woke supremacy. Donald Trump is a terrible representative of conservatism. Donald Trump is a terrible representative of American values, of Western principle. Donald Trump is not Jordan Peterson. Donald Trump is not James Lindsay. Donald Trump is not even Mike Pence. Donald Trump is not even a normal Republican. He's not an articulate, intelligent person who can do what needs to be done to represent anti-woke or pro-Western, classically liberal ideas. We saw this at the debate, the first debate, when he was asked about critical race theory and the rioting and Black Lives Matter, and he kind of stuttered a bit and just was like, "Oh, it's a reversal of the racism," and that was about as much as he was able to sputter out. That is not convincing, and it doesn't tell people what is actually going on with woke supremacy. It does not tell people what is going on with the culture war. Donald Trump has never, ever at any point been able to articulate these things clearly. And as a matter of fact, he articulates them poorly enough that it makes it very, very easy to portray the culture war as you are for Trump and you are for him with all of his immense personal failings and his penchant for immaturity, his penchant for incompetence. I'm not going to say racism. I don't know if Donald Trump is racist. I find that conversation rather boring. I don't know the answer to whether or not he is racist. But I do think he's incompetent, and I do think he's inarticulate, and you just can't have that. If Donald Trump is the representative in government as president of what is anti-woke, that's really bad for those of us who are anti-woke. That's really bad for those of us in the intellectual dark web. He is misrepresenting the hell out of us. And I do kind of hope he goes. I think there's an argument to be made that him winning re-election is preferable to a massive Biden landslide where the Democrats have 57 seats in the Senate and they can pack the courts. Maybe you could convince me that that is preferable to, or that Trump's re-election is preferable to that scenario. You could not, I don't think you could convince me. I would be a little more upset if Trump wins on Tuesday than if Biden wins super narrowly and there's a Republican Senate. I would prefer that. Because what I want to happen is I do want Trump to go. And I want there to be an opening then in the conversation in the culture war for people to have the conversation and not have it become about Trump, and to not feel as though I need to defend Trump, because frankly, he is indefensible. And I have said this on this show before. I have said this on another show that I did. I don't like woke supremacy. I do not like the Democrats, and I stand against them with every fiber in my being. The only Democrat I am voting for this year is Tulsi Gabbard. But I will never endorse Trump and say that he is this amazing savior figure that was going to fix all this. He clearly wasn't. And in many ways, he has made it worse because I don't think he really, I've said this before, he doesn't really know what is actually going on. He doesn't really get the culture war. He doesn't know what role he plays and what he is tasked with as the representative of the political resistance to these ideas. He is not a capable actor in that respect. And I do not want him to continue to be president of this country. Even though my number one concern is something which he's done a couple good things on. I am very grateful to Donald Trump for banning the critical race theory indoctrination sessions in government contractors. There are some other things he has done on policy for which I am grateful, and which I give him full credit for. But he is so toxic to the brand of not woke, which is everything from your Brett Weinsteins on the left to your Donald Trumps on the right. We are all lumped together, like it or not. And if Donald Trump is the president, he dominates the conversation and he makes that brand of not woke completely toxic. And I have experienced this in many conversations where I feel like I am making headway with people and getting them to come around to the idea that woke supremacy is a massive problem. And all of a sudden, Trump comes up and the conversation is over because I can't defend him, people. I can't do it. And I don't want to. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I am not voting for him in 2020. I want him to go. That being said, I do not want Democrats to control any more than the presidency. I do want Trump gone. I would prefer having Biden as president. I know that probably means the critical race theory trainings will come back. That stuff, I wish I could have my cake and eat it too. I wish I could keep all this good stuff that Trump did. The other one, big one, is Department of Education. They're going to bring back the ridiculous standards in terms of the rights of the accused on college campuses when accused of sexual assault. That's ridiculous. That's going to be terrible when Biden wins. There are no good options here. I don't want Biden, but I prefer him to Trump. I'm not voting for Biden, but I was closer to voting for him, I think, than I was to Trump. Trump I actually think that I think a Biden victory helps us in the culture war more than a Trump victory. Having Trump around is a huge liability to all of us who are fighting woke supremacy, and we need to get rid of him. I mean, imagine if you were running a company and this guy was your boss. You'd want to get rid of him and replace him with someone who is at least, I don't know, Joe Biden is, he's whatever. He does what people tell him to do. But I want a Republican Senate as a check on Joe Biden, or at least a Senate that is very narrowly Democratic, because then there's only so much Biden can do. Yes, he'll still be able to do the stuff at the federal level, the critical race theory trainings, the Dear Colleague stuff at the college campuses. However, if we're with a Republican Senate, Biden can't pack the courts. He can't. He can't do all of the really extreme stuff. So if the Republicans retain control of the Senate and Biden wins on Tuesday, I'll be like, yeah, that's really about as good as it was going to get for me as someone who's not enthusiastic about Biden or Trump and who didn't vote for either of them, who wants Republicans to win at every level except for the presidential level because of Donald Trump. I do vastly prefer, at this point, Republican policies, even though I disagree with them all the time on economic policies, just because I think the Democrats have lost their mind. I mean, the House isn't in play. I wish the Republicans could win the House, but it's not happening. I'm ruling that out, just like I ruled out a Trump landslide. So there's one other thing that is actually something I want to happen even more than Biden narrow victory in Republican Senate, but it is so unlikely to happen that I just wanted to give it as an addendum. But I do want to mention it. There is a scenario in which Kamala Harris does not become vice president. And I hate Kamala Harris. I think she's awful. She's way worse than Joe Biden. And I would vastly prefer Mike Pence to either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris at the top or bottom of the ticket. I'm going to tell you a scenario where there is a Biden-Pence administration and where I get everything I mentioned before, where Trump is gone, there's a Republican Senate, and to sweeten the deal, Kamala Harris is not vice president and does not have the distinction of being the first woman vice president. This is something I want because I do not like Kamala Harris at all. I think she is awful. I think she is craven and possibly the harbinger of woke supremacy whenever she assumes the presidency, which could happen in the next 4 to 8 years. That's neither here nor there. I'm going to tell you how we get a Biden-Pence administration. I don't know how familiar my listeners are with presidential election tie-breaking procedure. What is a tie in a presidential election? Well, there's 538 electoral votes. You need 270 to win. What happens if both candidates have 269 electoral votes and they are tied in the Electoral College? I'm glad you asked, because this is something that can happen and has happened, I think, twice, something like that, maybe 1 or 2 times in our nation's history. There's been a tie in the Electoral College. And if this occurs, the tie-breaking procedure, according to the Constitution, is that the House of Representatives will vote for president and the Senate votes for vice president. Now, it gets a little weird in the House because in the House, it's not a vote by member. It is a vote by state delegation. So, for instance, say the state of California has 55 members of Congress, or I think it's 53, and the majority of those, let's say 30 out of 53, vote during the tiebreak for Biden, then the state delegation's vote goes to Biden. And so it's actually a vote for 26 state delegations, which is, of course, a majority of the 50 total state delegations. It is not a vote by the membership of the House, but rather a vote by the state delegations, which is weird and makes it very difficult to predict because right now Democrats are in control of the House of Representatives, but they actually have a minority of the state delegations. I think they have like 23 or 24. And there's no way of knowing how that might change exactly after the election. So, and by the way, the way that this would work hypothetically, let's say Trump and Biden tie in the Electoral College, the Senate and the House that would be voting for the president and vice president would be the Senate and the House that come in and are sworn in on January 3rd as a result of the 2020 election, not the one we have now. So hypothetically, if the Senate flipped from Republican to Democrat, the new Senate would elect Kamala Harris vice president. But let's say hypothetically, there is a tie in the Electoral College and that Democrats manage to, this would be a very close election outcome. And let's say hypothetically, 269 electoral votes. Let's say hypothetically, the Republicans have managed to narrowly retain control of the Senate, not a ridiculous proposition in a narrow national polling environment, which if you have 269 electoral votes is probably the case. And let's say Democrats have actually taken a majority of the state delegations in the House, also not a ridiculous proposition. It is very close. I think it's like 24-26 right now. So there's a map that is not at all ridiculous where you get the 269 result. You take the map that I suggested before, where Biden wins 375 electoral votes. You flip Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania, which would be the craziest one. And then you flip Nebraska's 2nd congressional district and Maine's 2nd congressional district. These are both districts that Trump won last time. And in those two states, electoral votes are done by electoral district, not by state. The map that I just described is a 269 scenario, which is not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. And and in this case, Biden still wins Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado out there out west, and he also wins Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. So it's not like a crazy pro-Trump map either. So this is an electoral tie. And if this happens, and the Democrats control the House and the Republicans control the Senate, then I get what I really would be thrilled with on election night, which is I don't have to deal with Trump anymore and the brand that he gives me as someone who is against woke supremacy. And I don't have to deal with Kamala Harris being vice president. You would actually have a Biden-Pence administration, a Republican Senate, and a Democratic House, which is kind of like, all right, I'll take that one on the chin. That's not changing. There is something else about this that brings me a lot of joy, which is that let's say hypothetically that Joe Biden resigns because he's getting old. He maybe he does die in office. I certainly wish him good health, but let's say he dies in office. Let's say there's some kind of subterfuge by Kamala Harris. I'm not ruling that out. I think she is ruthless. Let's say the woke wing, the AOC wing of the Democratic Party runs him out of office by saying, you're not woke enough, you're a white man, get out. Maybe he just calls it quits. He goes, I'm tired, I'm going to go sleep in my basement. That was something where people thought Kamala Harris would be able to ascend to the presidency. But Joe Biden and the Democrats, who have to pretend that he is not old as hell, and that there is not a considerable possibility he could die in office or have to resign due to failing mental health. And we have seen him be a little questionable in terms of his mental capacity at his age, 78. If he were to do that in the scenario I've laid out where there is a Biden-Pence administration due to an electoral college tie, you get Pence as president. So the Democrats would be forced into a position where they have to pretend for at least 4 years that Joe Biden is completely mentally capable, even if he is not. And I'm not going to lie, that does make me laugh. The thought of Democrats pretending, basically doing weekend at Bernie's with Biden because Pence is his VP because there was an electoral college tie. The thought of Democrats having to go through this thrills me. I am not, the likelihood of an electoral college tie is so low, I'm trying not to get too excited, and yet I am, because this is so funny to me. And also Kamala Harris not getting to be the first woman vice president or vice president, period, also makes me laugh because I do not like Kamala Harris. I really don't like Kamala Harris. I'm trying very hard not to say that I hate Kamala Harris because I think hate is a strong word. But boy, do I not want Kamala Harris anywhere near the White House? And she is probably going to become vice president on Tuesday. And that makes me sad because I don't like her. So basically, the realistic scenario that I'm rooting for is Biden wins, and there's a narrow Democratic Senate or a Republican Senate. The crazy scenario that I'm rooting for that is almost certain not to happen, but if it does, this episode will become very, very funny, and I will probably repost this clip, is an electoral college tie in which Democrats control the majority of state delegations in the House and Republicans control the Senate, and you get a Biden-Pence administration. That is what I want. That is like my optimal scenario. It is almost certainly not going to happen. Okay, so let's say that my prediction of a solid Biden victory comes true. What do I think that means for the culture war? I'm talking about everything that's going to happen on Tuesday, but what's going to happen after Tuesday if Biden wins? First of all, if Trump wins, there's going to be riots and it's going to be really, really bad. I've talked about that on the show before, though. We'll get to that if it comes to it. Maybe Trump does win narrowly, like I said, and I'll address that. But for now, under the assumption that Biden wins and he wins solidly and there's a Democratic Senate, which is what I think is going to happen, it's actually kind of unpredictable what exactly will happen. There is a chance that I am not going to rule out. And I think this was the argument in the debate I mentioned before between Jesse Singal and James Lindsay, which I recommend to you. It's on Brett Weinstein's Unity channel. In that debate, Jesse Singal makes the argument that Biden might very well govern as a moderate, which is kind of what he said he will do. And of course, James Lindsay retorts with a series of points, one of which is that Biden has shown no capacity, nor has the Democratic Party writ large, to push back on woke supremacy whatsoever. And this is my number one concern with Biden, is that on numerous occasions he has caved to woke supremacists. He changed his position on the Hyde Amendment, which is federal funding for abortion, immediately after getting pressure from the woke people. He put Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on his transition committee or something, on some kind of a policy committee or campaign committee. And he said, Biden said that he thinks the supposed moderate in this election, Joe Biden, said that he thinks biologically male convicts should be housed with female convicts in prison as long as they identify as female if they're transgender. That's insane. That's a terrible idea that Joe Biden has supported. And he said that Antifa isn't real. He's an Antifa denialist. He believes in the myth. He believes Antifa is a myth, which is just ridiculous. And he's refused to condemn them by name on numerous occasions. These are all ways in which Biden has really failed, to me, to project that he is a moderate. However, he is campaigning right now. He is not president. And this could all change after he's elected. So, there's one of two possibilities. Biden wins and he snaps back to being sort of moderate. That'd be nice. I'd be okay with that. I could live with a moderate Democrat for a little bit, not have to talk about Trump anymore, maybe get a little bit of headway in the debate against woke supremacy, because it's a PR battle at this point. The war of ideas is over. Woke ideas are ridiculous, and anyone who's done an honest analysis has done that. Now it's time to win the PR battle with people over which side should be in control of the country, the side defending Western values or the woke side. And I think it'll be easier under a Biden presidency, especially a moderate Biden presidency, where he is pulling back on the wokeness a little bit, and it slows this whole thing down, because it's been accelerating up until this point, largely due to Trump's presence as a foil. Trump has fueled the fire of wokeness by providing them a foil, by providing them someone to point to and say, there's the racist, fascist Hitler figure, and if you're not with us, you're with him. Trump goes away, that gets better. Maybe Biden governs as a moderate. Maybe there's a Republican Senate or a narrowly Democratic Senate. They don't pack the court, so the Supreme Court is Republican, and maybe we're all okay. Maybe this election actually resolves some things and things get better. I was pretty authoritative about my electoral predictions. What happens after I'm less authoritative about? I'm going to say maybe that happens. There's also the possibility that Joe Biden is an absolute coward. And this is a strong possibility, and one that is evidenced by the way he ran his campaign, in not condemning Antifa by name, denying their existence, completely failing to push back at all on the gender-bending nonsense, on gender ideology, a queer theory and all of that, and also by just caving to woke pressure time and time again, by promising to pick a woman of color as his vice president, which is affirmative action at the highest level. These are all very woke things that Biden has done. And let's say hypothetically he doesn't push back on wokeness at all. especially in a scenario where the Democrats have a considerable majority in the Senate and maybe they pack the Supreme Court, yeah, we're in trouble. We're in trouble, folks. So if you're in the resistance cohort that I'm in, you're in the intellectual dark web, dissident right, you're trying to resist woke supremacy, try to keep an eye on what happens on Tuesday. And if Biden wins, pay very close attention to how he governs, because it's going to decide what our response is. It's going to be up to us to respond proportionally. If he is governing as a moderate, then we can slow down and we can just kind of try to win over some people and see if Trump no longer being there helps with that. And I suspect that it will. I think the optimal scenario for this election is Trump loses and Biden has to govern as a moderate, either because he does not have control of the Senate or because he has narrow control of the Senate, or because maybe there's an ounce of self-respect and patriotism still in that man. I believe there could be. I do not hate Joe Biden. And if there's an ounce of self-respect and patriotism still in that man, he will push back on wokeness at least a little. And there's been evidence that he might do that. Joe Biden has been pretty definitive in saying that rioting is bad. I know that's a low bar, right? That's a low bar, but he passed it. Joe Biden has, on at least 2 separate occasions, delivered statements that rioting and looting are bad. That's a start, and that's something you would not get from every Democratic candidate. You would not get that if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was the candidate for president for the Democrats, unfortunately. Fortunately, she is not. It is Joe Biden, who is preferable to AOC. You might not get that if Kamala Harris was the nominee. I don't know, but thankfully, she is not. She's the vice presidential nominee. So, I told you what I think is going to happen, what I want to happen, and what could happen afterwards. And I'll refocus on kind of what I recommend to listeners. Pay really close attention to how Biden governs in 2021 if he wins, and he is likely to win. Because that's really going to decide kind of what's next for the intellectual dark web, what's next for the resistance to woke supremacy. Because there is no scenario, even if Trump wins by a landslide, even if I get exactly what I want, where there's a Biden-Pence administration, there's no scenario where woke supremacy is defeated, where we blow up the Death Star and it's just over in the next 4 years. That is precluded, unfortunately, from being the case. We are in at least a 5 to 10 year battle for civilization with woke supremacy. Probably longer. It might be 20 years, 30, 50. Who knows? Could be 100 years. I don't know. But we're going to learn a lot about what the state of play is. And I'm hoping that things will decelerate a bit, as opposed to the way they accelerated after the 2016 election. I don't rule out the fact that we might be in a better place today had Trump not won in 2016. Everyone thinks it was such a great thing, for the culture war when Trump won. I don't know. I'm not. Things really accelerated after he won in a bad way, and it's made it impossible to have conversations with certain people to try and convince them that this is a problem. I show people what happened at Evergreen College to Brett Weinstein. I send them Mike Nana's documentary on the topic, which I recommend. And they go, oh, that's terrible. But like Trump, though, and they just want to talk about Trump. They're like, yeah, I think we should focus on Trump right now instead of woke supremacy. And I'm like, God fucking damn it. It's happened like dozens of times, people. I know a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals, and every fucking time I try to talk to them about this stuff, I get very frustrated. Try not to curse too often on this show, but I can't help it, because when it gets down to Trump, it's like, well, I can't really defend him, and I don't want to, and I don't think I should have to. We're talking about this woke supremacy thing. And by the way, I've had some success. There are 2 very close people in my life, my girlfriend and also my best friend in the whole world, whom, in large part due to my closeness with them, I've been able to kind of have them come around and agree that woke supremacy is a greater threat than Trump ever could be. I've had some success, but I have had more failure than success with people. And the number one cause of failure in the conversations where I'm trying to convince people to come around on this issue of what's going on in the culture war with woke supremacy, the number one obstacle I am facing is Donald Trump. God, the guy's just got to go. And I could be wrong. I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong. Maybe Biden comes in and he is just doing whatever the hell AOC and the woke supremacists tell him to do. In which case, that might be worse than having Donald Trump for 4 more years. But God damn it, why do I have to make that choice? This is why I'm voting for Tulsi Gabbard. I am writing in a name, people. I can't make this choice. I hate this. I hate this election. I hate everything about it. Even in 2016, I think I could defend my Clinton vote to this day. I don't like Hillary Clinton, by the way, but I mean, I consider Hillary Clinton in 2016 to have been a stand-in for the Democratic Party. She's not like a genuine person who would actually do what she wants to do. She would do what the Democratic Party tells her to do. I consider Joe Biden to be the same thing. So my rationale for having voted for Clinton and not being ashamed of that vote at all and not voting for Biden is that the Democratic Party has gotten considerably crazier in the past 4 years. So if both candidates, Clinton and Biden, are stand-ins for the Democratic Party, then it's much easier for me to defend my Clinton vote because the Democratic Party was less crazy in 2016 than it is for me to defend a potential vote that I was considering making for Joe Biden, which I am not making because I think it's pretty indefensible. But Jesse Singal gives a good defense of it in that debate that I mentioned on the Unity channel. I'll talk about Unity 2020 for a minute, just because I think that's Unity 2020, if you don't know, it was Brett Weinstein's attempt to create a ticket with one moderate Republican, one moderate Democrat. It ended up being Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw. They were going to try and draft them into the race and, give everyone this third independent ticket option to vote for. It failed pretty miserably. It was a great idea that was just way too late in the cycle to succeed. And he is very likely to try this again in 2024. I want to say that I am in full support of the Unity movement. I am voting for Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw, which was the Unity ticket. And I'm very interested in getting involved with that in 2024. I didn't get involved with it in 2020 because I just didn't think it was likely to succeed, and it did not. But I respect the hell out of Brett Weinstein for doing it. Sincerely, thank you to Brett Weinstein. It's been great to watch his content. Anyone who doesn't watch Dark Horse or engage with the Unity, I think they're called campfires that he has. Brett Weinstein, he's interviewed Dan Crenshaw, Tulsi Gabbard, Justin Amash, and other people who are trying to get us out of this bind where our choices are Trump and Biden, people like that. And that's kind of how I think maybe this whole thing in the culture war gets resolved. It's been nice to see that materialize with Brett Weinstein, because I think it's actually a really good idea that wasn't going to work this cycle, because I think he tried to launch it in like August. It was like way too late. And if you launch it on time next time, if you launch Unity 2024 in 2022 or 2023, I think there's a non-zero chance you could succeed. I think about a ticket with Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro on it. I think about a ticket with Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw on it, a ticket with a Democrat and a Republican on it. And I think this country is in the mood for some goddamn unity. I think there's actually a lot of people that would vote for that ticket. I think there's a lot of people on the left and the right who would vote for that ticket, not just independents. So I like unity. I like that campaign. I recommend it to anyone who's listening to this show to check out Brett Weinstein and the Unity campaign. They also faced a lot of censorship and backlash on Twitter in particular. I think their account was deleted. So clearly they're considered somewhat of a threat to what Brett Weinstein calls the duopoly, the Democratic Republican parties, and especially the Democratic Party stranglehold on social media. So, the election is on Tuesday. You know what I think is going to happen. You know what I want to happen. You know how I think we in the resistance should conduct ourselves in the aftermath, which is kind of to wait and see, I would say. It's a big unanswered question how exactly Biden is going to govern. I don't feel particularly confident that he's going to be 100% woke nor 100% moderate. It's probably going to be something in between, and I want to know exactly where on the spectrum he's going to sit as president. I am fearful he'll be more on the woke end, but we'll have to see. But anyway, you've got my lowdown on Tuesday. And when this comes out, there'll only be one day left. And, it's 4 years coming. It's a big moment. It's hard not to feel a little nervous and crazy. And I would just encourage everyone to surround yourself with good people and accept what happens and watch what happens on Tuesday. I also want to mention some programming notes for this show. So, you'll notice we didn't have a show last week. I tried to announce on Twitter and on the YouTube community tab that I was going to skip a week of the show. I think I'm going to go to bi-weekly. The show is going to continue. It's going to continue in a bi-weekly format indefinitely. This is for a few different reasons. One reason is just that I want to refocus my efforts on the YouTube channel and shorter form content a little bit, short video essays and comedy videos and whatnot. Another reason why I'm going to switch to bi-weekly is just because it'll make it easier for me to work on the show. The show is actually fairly demanding. I have to come up with my show notes and what I want to talk about. I have to research my guests. I have to acquire my guests, which can sometimes be pretty hard. Some people are, you got to email them many times and just work everything out and schedule things. And it's pretty demanding, especially because I work full time. I don't make a dime from this. I'm considering opening up a Patreon at some point. If you're interested in Patreon, comment that or something. I'm curious. But in any case, I don't make a dime from this. I work full time outside of doing this show and this channel. So I think I'm just going to switch the podcast to bi-weekly. And that's going to be the case indefinitely. I might make another shorter announcement, but for now, you're learning that at the end of today's show. The show is going to continue. And I'm going to try and get some guests as well, but I think it'll be easier for me to get guests and to do the show if I switch it to bi-weekly. So expect the show to be produced every other week as opposed to every week until future notice. I will hopefully be making more YouTube content. If you're not subscribed to the Scott Veritas YouTube channel, please subscribe. I'm hoping to make more content on that channel by switching this show to bi-weekly. But I like doing this show, so the show is going to continue, just not as often. And I like having guests, by the way. I know today I don't have a guest. I thought that would be best for the show before the election. I just didn't think there's anyone I particularly should be talking to about the election of the people who I can talk to. But I'll be having some more guests. And yeah, I really appreciate all of you guys listening. And if you have recommendations for how to do the show, one thing that I'm considering and that I want to hear from those of you listening on YouTube is I'm not going to lock this in yet. We are going to switch the show to bi-weekly, but one thing I'm considering that I haven't decided yet is I might stop posting the full podcast on YouTube. I will always post the full podcast on all audio platforms, audio and Spotify, or iTunes and Spotify, but I might not post the full show on YouTube. I might start posting clips on YouTube, and I want to hear from you guys if you think that's best. Another thing I want to do before I sign off today is sincerely thank you all for listening to the show. We've reached 1,600 subscribers on the YouTube channel. We're averaging close to 500 listeners per episode on audio platforms, and I just really appreciate that. It's been a great journey. It's been a little over a year since I started this show. All the hype with the elections just got me thinking about the past few years, and this has been a big part of my life, and I'm looking forward to growing it more. There are some big things in the works in terms of ways that I'm planning on growing this channel. I think I have an interview on a channel where I'm going to be on someone else's podcast coming up. It's not completely finalized, but that I think is going to bring in a lot of new people. And I want to give you guys my email address for this show because I want to hear from some of you. I just would love to get to know some of my fans, whether you're listening via audio platforms or on YouTube. I'm gonna give you, first of all, my Twitter, where you can DM me, which is at Scott_Veritas. DM me if you want to just get in touch, mention you're a fan of the show, and I might chat with you for a little bit, get to know you a little bit. And then the email is veritasscott@gmail.com. You can email me there if you want to chat. I can't guarantee that I'm going to respond to you. At this level with 1,600 subscribers, I might get very few emails or I might get dozens or hundreds. There's no way for me to know exactly what the response rate will be, but that's the email, veritasscott@gmail.com, VERITASSCOTT @gmail. And the Twitter is the Twitter is @Scott_Veritas. So yeah, just thanks for listening to the show. And if you're a fan, especially if you're a longtime fan, if you've wanted to speak to me, we're not going to do a call or anything, but I just love to hear from you guys, whatever it might be. Just words of encouragement, questions about the show, suggestions for the show. Email me, Twitter DM me. I'd love to hear from you. So with that, happy Halloween, which is when I'm filming today's episode. Happy voting and election day, which is around when this episode will come out. And thank you for listening to Red Pill Nation. I really appreciate it, and I hope to hear from some of you guys. Thanks again.